Thank you, everyone, for joining us for Revelation Apocalypse. I'm Propheties De Merlin, along with my co-host Morgan LeFay and Bray Mysterio. Today, we'll be discussing humanity's long-standing fascination with the end of the world, from Three-Eye Atlas to biblical prophecy, to the many theories and mysteries that lie between, as well as what all of this may or may not mean for magical manifestation in our modern age. Before we begin, it should probably be noted we'll be touching on some very potentially sensitive and controversial topics. Yet our intent is in no way to point fingers or fuel further fear or demonize any group of people or belief system. We're not here to choose a side, simply here to explore and to question, and to break down these many concepts with as much scientific, archaeological, historical, and scholarly insights as possible. Our goal is simple: to leave you, our listeners, better informed, more grounded, hopefully a little more at peace than when we arrived. First, Bray Mysterio is going to discuss some of the mysteries and unique aspects of Three-Eye Atlas and help us all have a slightly better understanding of what actually is going on. So, Bray, everyone, including myself, obviously, wants to know what the hell is up with this thing. Is it a rock? Is it aliens?
Yeah. So I guess first let me set the stage by just getting everyone to understand what Three-Eye Atlas is. So the three-eye in the name means that it's the third interstellar object of its kind to pass through our solar system. That means there was two before it. There was a one-eye Oumuamua, if I said that right, and then a two-eye Borisov, which were both comets that were interstellar objects that passed through our solar system in the past. And this one is the third of its kind, but it's been making a lot of rounds in social media and, coming up with conspiracy theories because it's displaying unusual behavior that has people kind of scratching their heads and wondering, well, could it be something else? Could it not be a comet and perhaps something else? So NASA first discovered this in July of 2025, and they noticed this object was passing through our solar system, or was on a trajectory to pass through our solar system, and was originating from a place far within our galaxy. Um, and they measured it to be about Manhattan scale, which is like tens of kilometers across, making it quite bigger than the previous asteroids or comets that have passed through. Um, and they're able to, observe this comet and figure out what kind of materials are in it. And they found that there's ices and organics, different materials, that they measured through the comet. Um, and one of the first behaviors it exhibited that was a little strange was that as it approached our sun, it became a lot brighter than I guess usual. So most comets, are made of like rock or something that doesn't reflect as much, but this one reflected a lot of sunlight, and it was, kind of unusual that the brightness was increasing a lot more than normal. Um, and there was also signs of it having a strong gas surrounding it. Um, and that has led to some theories that maybe it's an exhaust for a spaceship. Um, and so the comet had lots of different uh, you know chemicals like carbon dioxide. I don't want to get too much into the science nature of it, but um, it was an unusual metal and volatile chemical mix, um, which is again, an unusual feature of it. But it just kind of shows that it was formed in a very chemically different planetary system than we're used to. One of the other features of it was that, if you think of, you throw like a baseball, and if you imagine the air molecules going around it, you can imagine like there's a tail at the end of it. and that's on the opposite side of where you threw it from. Well, this comet had an unusual anti-tail. So that means like the tail was in front of where it was moving, which is unusual. You would think the tail would be behind where it's moving. If you think of a star, wish upon the stars and they see a comet flying through the sky, you always imagine the tail's on the opposite side. So it'd be very weird to see it on the side that it's moving in. But it's still, it's rare, but it can still happen depending on how the dust is distributed along the comet. Um, Another kind of unique thing about it that people were conceptualizing that, maybe it was intelligently controlled is because of its trajectory through our solar system, it is narrowly passing through a lot of our planet's orbits. So it's just like barely missing Jupiter and Mars, and it thankfully didn't get too close to the Earth, but it passed by very closely to some other planets in our solar system, which might make you think, well, maybe it's, intelligently controlled. How do we know? Um, and so, social media would talk about it, and there were scientists that speculated that, maybe it has like a 40% chance of being an alien aircraft or something. But um, at the end of the day, even though the comet itself had strange behaviors and anomalous features, um, all of it was still somewhat explainable through physics and comet behavior as we know it today. The unusual aspects of it are really just derived from us not knowing that a comet of this type could form, and that it's from a very far distant, chemically different, like planetary system than we're used to. So we're not going to fully understand the behaviors or how a comet from that area in space is going to interact when it gets close to our sun and our solar system. But all the alien theories and everything didn't really have direct evidence of that. There was no like radio transmissions or power or engineered structure observed through it. So it really seems to be um, more of just an anomalous comet than something that's kind of impossible or something unexplainable. So that's the gist of it. Um, I guess for your thoughts, Morgan.
Um, I think it's possible that they just wanted to like desensitize us to the thought, like if aliens are real and they know about it, they would want us to like not be scared or whatever, like freak out, panic when they tell us about it finally. So letting the information come out slowly and making it like a big topic, kind of like making it to the point where people don't really even care anymore. Like if someone like said aliens are real at this point in the government, we would all kind of just be like, okay, yeah, we know. Like it's been desensitized a lot. So I think that could be part of it. I also think it could
Hmm.
have some to do with like the monitoring of our skies, like drones in the sky and stuff like that, getting us more comfortable with like just seeing stuff in the sky and not always having an explanation for it.
Hmm.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
That's a really good point because I think the more we are, I think a lot of people today through television, through movies, through now what is on the news and with the drones in the sky, like Morgan was saying, we are ready. If they're ever going to tell us, I think most people are going to go, yeah, I knew that, dude. Like, okay, next. Like it's almost become like not news for this thought to be there. So I do suspect we're probably closer to disclosure than we think. And I'm actually one to believe that that's going to be an awesome thing. I don't think that has to be accompanied by an apocalypse, but that's just my thoughts. And I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts again in the comments. Next up, biblical prophecy, followed by what all of this may mean for the possible magical manifestation of our reality and our part in that. But before I hand things over to Morgan to talk about the red heifer situation, I would like to begin with one of the most misunderstood concepts about magic and sacred numerology, which is, I think everyone knows that a huge part of prophecy, biblical, typically, and just a lot of the perception around that leading up to today revolves around the number 666. And, we we're recording this podcast at 7:06, which was our kind of joke of 666 p.m. But I kind of wanted to break this down from a couple different perspectives so that people could really understand where this number comes from, how it got to the way it is today, and what it might have originally meant. The coolest part for me, and I'm going to start with what I think is the coolest part, which is the scientific perspective of the number 666, which indeed is the number of man and beast and life on this planet, and possibly the known universe, if there is life out there, which I think there is, and a lot of people will probably think there is. Interestingly, we are all made of carbon. Everything that's alive that we know of, and that is in carbon itself is basically a dead star matter, and it's also the most stable isotope that we know of. And interestingly enough, carbon is comprised of 6 protons, 6 neutrons, and 6 electrons. And that's some wild stuff, because the Bible directly states it's not the number of evil. It directly states it's the number of man and the number of beast. And the actual Bible verse, is from King James. Like, this is from the King James version of the Bible. I'm just going to read this so you can hear it and know what it actually says. Revelations 13:18 states that, "Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666." So then that is, 666. That's where 666 comes from in this apocalyptic and later perceived as evil connotation. And so why is it called both the number of man and the beast? In the original text, the number of the beast and the number of man are the same, as we just saw. And what esotericists have come to understand this to me is that this number represents humanity and mortality and things like imperfection and the physical material world. And it wasn't ever originally meant to be this ultimate number of evil. That idea evolved much later when certain Christian traditions kind of blended it with satanic imagery. And medieval theologians actually tied 666 to imperfection. Why they did this is actually credited to numerology, because in numerology, the number 7 symbolizes divine completeness. So anything 666 was kind of seen as inherently flawed. And that symbolism sort of later evolved into this idea that it must be evil because it's not a 7. And that this can be verified. You can look this up. I implore you to look this up. It's very interesting stuff. But it is at the same time, though, endlessly interesting to me that all life that we know of is built from carbon-12, which is comprised of these 6 protons, 6 neutrons, and 6 electrons, literally equaling 666, right? So it is the number of man in a very scientific sense, because it is also the number of carbon-based life. And from an esoteric perspective, on the other hand, the number 666 is and has been for some time associated with the planet Saturn. And this connection doesn't actually come from early Christianity at all. Its roots are actually found in Hellenistic and later Greco-Roman occult numerology, especially among Neoplatonic and Hermetic writers who associated Saturn with limitation, matter, kind of the heaviness of the physical world. Saturn's Greek name, obviously, Kronos, was tied to restricted forces and the prison of incarnation. And later esoteric traditions, particularly Renaissance magic of the 19th century, sort of assigned the number 6 to Saturn through planetary magic squares, giving rise to the 6x6 square, whose sum is obviously 666. So the Saturn connection is a post-biblical occult development. It's not the origin of the number, which in early Christianity more points towards Nero, although I don't know that anyone is 100% certain of that. But these later traditions sort of fused Saturn, matter, and the triple sixes into this symbolic framework that predates most modern Christian interpretations, even if it doesn't predate Christianity itself. Again, interestingly enough, modern astronomy later confirmed that, and this is, I know Psycho Sorcerer and I talk about this often, that Saturn's North Pole contains a massive hexagonal jet stream pattern, which is actually like a naturally occurring 6-sided atmospheric structure. When you look at the top of Saturn, its North Pole, it looks like you're looking at a giant hexagram carved into the planet. What it really is a giant never-ending storm. And it is, it makes the association with the sixes even more interesting, considering ancient people couldn't have known that when they assigned, these assignments were made. And when sixes were equated to Saturn, that happened before we had telescopes. So it's fun stuff. But Saturn's also always and often mislabeled as evil or linked to Satan, even though historically its cultural mythological roots suggest it was a Roman god of agriculture and time. The term Father Time, Saturnalia, where we get Christmas, Santa Claus, that's not to mention the countless archetypal paralleling gods that date back to like the Egyptians and the ancient Sumerians and the early Vedic myths. This dark kind of reputation basically mostly comes from later 19th century misunderstandings and somewhat twisted etymological wordplay, not from the planet's actual mythology. And I think this is a prime example of how misunderstood a subject can become over a period of time, and leads at least to some of the perpetual hype we see today. And this kind of, this sort of just prefaces wonderfully Morgan's next story of the red heifers, which I think everyone's going to be really interested to hear.
Yeah, so let's get into this weirdness. This is something I've been interested in a while. They've been talking about this for the past like 3 or 4 years. So let's get into it. There have been 9 red heifer sacrifices since the time of Moses until the destruction of the Second Temple. So what it was an ancient Jewish temple ritual. It was described in Numbers 19 in the Torah. The chapter says the Israelites were to bring a red heifer without defect. So basically, for this ritual that needed to take place, they had to sacrifice a red cow. And this cow couldn't have any impurities on it at all. Like if it had a single white hair or if it had a scratch, anything, it would be disqualified from this ritual. And that's why there's only ever been 9 red heifer sacrifices. So what was this ritual? It was meant for purification of people who had become unclean, mainly through death or touching a corpse. That kind of impurity in the Hebrew Bible is very serious to them. By being sprinkled with the water mixture that they would make from the ashes of the heifer, they made it from the ashes, a couple different herbs, and spring water. Someone could be ritually cleansed and be allowed to re-enter holy places or perform important temple duties. Now, some groups believe the red heifer to be a prophecy. Some believe the 10th heifer will appear when the Messiah returns. Some believe it will bring about the end times. And also some people believe it's needed for the building of the third temple. So an interesting group, the Temple Institute, which is an organization in Jerusalem, is dedicated to finding the next red heifer and completing the 10th sacrifice. In Judaism, the ritual is not a end time sign. Jewish people think it will bring about their Messiah, not the apocalypse. But here's where things kind of get messy. Certain Christian teachings link it to events in Revelations, Daniel, and apocalyptic theology. Many Christians believe a third temple will be built in the end times. The Antichrist will enter that temple, and then Jesus will return. So basically, if there's no third temple, there will be no end times in our timeline. If there is a third temple, they believe that the end times are coming soon. So when the Temple Institute started looking for a red heifer in 2022, and it ordered some from Texas, it, I believe, acquired 5 red calves from Texas that were specifically bred for this. They're trying to breed like a cow with perfect genes so that they can accomplish this. It set off alarms in certain people's minds that the temple would be coming soon and the end time timeline must be starting. And media popularized the idea like crazy. And now there's like this strong cultural association with this ritual and the end times. And we have like a large population of people believing that if the red heifer is sacrificed, that the end times are beginning. So I find it really interesting. What do you think about it, Bray?
Yeah, that's quite a historical story that may lead to something that could end the world, I guess. But I don't know if I believe it will kick off the end of times. But it's certainly a very interesting ritual that they conducted. Um, and you know, it's no surprise that with how rare it has been, that it's caused such a spark in what could be, perceived as being the end of times when the next one happens, because it would be the 10th one, and um, that it seems to line up with all these signs in religion that uh, it could be starting that. But um, I don't know if that's really going to be the case. I guess we're all just kind of waiting to see. But it is really kind of interesting that they're breeding red heifers exactly for this purpose. That sounds a little bit like what we're going to eventually talk about here in a moment.
Well, yeah, and I think it's important to realize that if you are Jewish, this does not signify that it is bringing about the end of the world. It is a signification of one of two things. It is we are going to be building this third temple, and this is going to be bringing about our Messiah. The Jewish Messiah is not the Christian Messiah. They do not believe that Christ
Mm,
is the Messiah. So to a Jewish person, this is not about the end of the world, and this is their
true,
tradition, right? So this is
true.
they are thinking that they're coming to their point in time of betterment and whatever, whereas, as Morgan was saying, this Christian perspective of it has turned it and associated it somewhat automatically with revelations and the
Right.
idea of an end of the world time. So to a Christian, it may seem, it very could, it's going to feel like, oh no, because in certain parts of Revelation, certain things that have to happen that coincide with what you know the Jewish people may be doing with these cows or whatever in the third temple, that somewhat
Mm,
coincides with some things mentioned in the book of Revelations. Yet that does not in any way, shape, or form mean that we're going to be bringing about the end of the world. The world is not going to end until the sun engulfs it or a asteroid breaks it apart or something crazy, right? Like
mm-hmm,
it's not
mm-hmm.
nothing we're going to do is going to end the world. The world's been here before us, and if we're not careful and good, it will be here after us. And
Right.
I think a lot, it's interestingly, what Morgan was saying, I think, leads directly into the next topic that I'd like to touch on, which is something that somewhat personally, I've heard this, I've seen a lot of scholars say this, and I had to dig into it because I wanted to know if there was any truth to it. Because, and as you all know, we're not going to get into any politics or details here, but there has been a recent peace deal proposed and being worked on, between Israel and some people who don't get along very well with them. And a lot of people have been correlating that and saying that parallels with an alleged story in Revelations that mentions a peace treaty brought about between the Israelites and their enemies by a foreign prince, whom some, but not all, Christians believe may be, in fact, the Antichrist of Christianity. The thing that I think everyone is missing here is that Israel's been signing peace treaties as long as peace treaties have been a thing. And peace in the Middle East is not an easy thing to achieve. But I personally think that ultimately peace in the Middle East, as well as peace everywhere on earth, is inevitable. It sort of has to be. But what isn't inevitable is war and calamity. Those are things that, we do have a bit of a say in. And I want to make that extremely clear, that no one can bring about the end of the world without our involvement. There's a lot of
Participation.
us. Yeah, and I think two really significant underlying factors that may play a role here are confirmation bias and a thing called apophenia, which is very similar to confirmation bias. And we all do this occasionally, some more than others, but we interpret information sometimes in a way that confirms what we already are sort of predisposed to believe, right? So whereas it's a great mental and philosophical gymnastic to attempt to connect the dots between all things, and that's what we love doing here at Pod Meta, right? But sometimes we can be naturally geared or unnaturally geared to connect the dots that might not actually connect. So I think it's something we all have to be sort of aware of. I think it should also probably be noted, and this is fundamental to this misconception concerning the time frame of the covenant between the Israelites and their enemies, which is mentioned in the Bible, and the somewhat misdirected assumption that this is or might be paralleling the pages of Revelations and what we're seeing happen and play out today. That nowhere in Revelations is this mentioned, yet it has been clumped into that notion that when these things happen, this is a sign for Revelations. And I can't stress this enough, that the only mention of anything that could even be slightly perceived as a peace treaty between Israel and other parts of the Middle East isn't mentioned in Revelations. It's mentioned in Daniel, yet not a word in Daniel says anything about a peace treaty, says anything about the Antichrist. So that has just been completely swept into a category by later, uh, I would say scholars, but it doesn't seem very scholarly to take this information and just clump it. It just kind of evolved over time, and people thinking that, when Daniel says that Israel will enter a covenant with their enemies that is brought about by a prince, and then later that week the prince will go back on this deal, and this will and then there are people who have paralleled that happening in Daniel with certain things that are mentioned in Revelations, and they have assumed that this somehow means when Israel signs a peace treaty, whoever is the one who brings that peace treaty about must be the Antichrist, and it must be signaling the end of the world. Yet nowhere in the book is this mentioned or even halfway clarified.
Yeah, I think that's rather interesting that bringing about peace is somehow a sign of the end of times. Sounds a little backwards to me, but
Well, and it is really because, I mean, well, it's become, I think this is something that's happened over the course of thousands of years, obviously, in how we've grown to perceive all of these things and misperceive all of these things and misunderstand these things. It
yeah,
absolutely is strange that anyone would ever just automatically jump to the idea that if there was peace in the Middle East, it must be the end of the world. I get that it seems like an out there idea and, it must be raining cats and dogs. But again, as I said, earlier, I kind of think peace in the Middle East, as well as peace all over the world, must be inevitable, is my personal view. If we have any chance of actually, the human species surviving, someday we actually could have a world of peace, as crazy and outlandish as that sounds. And it doesn't have to mean
yeah,
that it's the end of times, It's kind of weird that that's happened, but that is kind of what's happened.
yeah. No, I think it's these people who already hold these beliefs that see it as a sign, um, supporting their own beliefs. But I think, the fact of the matter is we should all be striving for peace worldwide. And I think it's a very good thing to have more peace treaties signed and less war overall. Um, that's just going to lead to a better future for everybody.
100%. And again, this is, I think, where I think confirmation bias plays a huge role there, where it's like, depending on what side of the aisle you're sitting on, you have these pre-instilled uh, ideas. You have been taught, whether you actually believe them or not, they're still in your head. And certainly if you do believe them, they're very much in the forefront of your mind. And I think it's really easy to look back at certain things and look forward and look at the present and go, oh my God, it's all converging. And this must mean this, and this must mean this. And you start connecting these dots that actually don't connect. And then you have yourself what feels like this kind of epic and uh, dangerous prophesiacal sort of situation happening. When in all reality, what if people are just truly working on a peace deal in the Middle East? What if we, like, what if peace is finally actually going to come about? It doesn't have
Yeah,
to equal something horrible, but yeah, I mean, it's fun stuff. It's geeky stuff, and then it can be very scary and dangerous stuff if taken the wrong way and out of context and misunderstood. And I think it's important that we all, sort of keep that in mind going forward. That it doesn't always have to spell disaster when we're talking about peace.
for sure.
I mean, yeah, I also agree. I think that was really well said. What's happening in the Middle East, it's likely to end one day, and I think we will have peace at some point. And I think it's important to hope for that and not get caught up in all the bad and negative that people are trying to spread. And that kind of enters right into what I'm going to talk
Yeah,
about next, which is manifestation and bad magic. So we know that the CIA has looked into these topics a lot. The military has done lots of testing on manifestation and how our mind and our words can affect the reality around us. One of my favorite examples and ways to explain like how this works and how you can see it for yourself working is through frustration. There's a snowball effect that you can see happening when you get very frustrated. And how that works is you'll get frustrated and then something else will happen. Say you're walking and your sleeve gets caught on something and it annoys you a little bit more, or you're walking and you stub your toe and you get even more annoyed, or someone said something and it makes you even more annoyed. This happens to everyone. Um, we don't exactly know why or how, but for some reason this happens. And with frustration, because we as humans are so like hyper focused on things that annoy us, it's easier to see with this specific like emotion. So I like to use that as an example. But now, if you think about the fact that we can easily change what's happening around us like that, and uh, what we're experiencing, think about if a mass population at the same time has the same belief, and is that belief positive for humanity, or is that belief negative for humanity? Are we pushing things in a good way, or are we like hoping for our own demise? So um I think it's important to ask yourself, what are we manifesting, and to be more aware of what it is that we are all thinking of together. It's important to picture the future positively. It's important to not believe and put all your eggs in the basket of the world is going to end. Because if
Hmm.
we truly are manifesting what's happening around us, that can't be good for anyone. So, what do you guys have to say on that? I'll hand that over to Bray first.
For sure. Yeah. I can't tell you how many times I've started off my day in a good mood, and then all of a sudden I have a really good day. And other times I start my day off in a bad mood, and it turns out to be a bad day. It's really, it's not a surprise, and it's something we all go through. Um, and I think it really is about your mindset. And if you set your mind, to accomplishing things, to making the world a better place every day, despite how things may happen to you, you may end up finding yourself in a better place in your life, just in general. And that's something we should all strive for. But it really is, in your mind, kind of how you perpetuate your own thoughts, and it will eventually, cause you to live in that, and want to make that a nice place to live. So, yeah, I think that's a very important aspect of kind of what we're dealing with here, and how we need to think about the future of mankind as a whole. Um, and I'd like to just uh, ask the question of just, you know, why is it that, when an interstellar object comes in, that we think it's gonna end the world, or that it could be an alien that's gonna destroy us? Why is it that we can't strive for peace in the Middle East? Why does that have to be alarming? Um, why does these sacrifices have to mean that, it could be the end of times, or maybe it's not, depending on your perspective. But it's really just like, why do we keep jumping at every opportunity we can to think that it might be the end of times? Um, so, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with everything each of you just said. Excellent points. I'm 100% with you on that. And it's funny because in the trailer for this podcast, we posed one question to our audience, which was, what if this belief was by design? And I'm sitting here and I'm listening to you guys, and I've gone over the research from my end of it. And I think individually, we sort of each answered that question. And in this modern world where what gets the most views and likes goes to the top of whatever algorithm, and that can be monetized. We've sort of misplaced our attention to clarification with a kind of need for excitement and drama because we love it. If you look at the success of the horror genre in general, horror films, it's a clear-cut sign that we love to be scared. The difference is when we pick up a book to read or we watch one of these films, we know going in, this is a piece of fiction. This is for personal catharsis. It's not to be taken as fact. Whereas in the last 30 to 40 years, I think all media, including how we get our news, has become more and more sensationalized to the point where anyone with a huge TikTok or a YouTube following can say something, and all of a sudden a million other people are reporting and repeating it. And it's like they have to, because if that info doesn't sound divisive or dramatic or compelling, no one's going to click on it. And hence our trailer and our marketing materials for this very podcast. And I think once we collectively acknowledge that there isn't always a boogeyman out there to get us, not saying there aren't bad guys sometimes doing bad things, there are, but we have to somewhere in here realize that everything happening is happening because to some degree, we are allowing it to happen. And we love this drama, but it's also important, I think, to remember, it is our draw to all of these things that is allowing what I chalk up to the one common thread between each of the subjects we've talked about, in my view, isn't the apocalypse, it's sensationalism. And we love to be sensationalized. And yet in that process, I think we forget that we are the commodity of this planet. What we watch is what is perpetuated to the top. What we do is what is ultimately put in stores and sold to us. And everything that we say, think, and every action we take has somewhat of a more powerful effect on the world than I think most of us are taking into consideration. Be that through our economic choices, our beliefs, be they religious, magical, witchy, or even atheist, like whether it's manifestation, prayer, or simply self-hypnosis. I don't think the apocalypse is inevitable. I think a mass awakening of realization absolutely could be. And I think it's up to each and every one of us to see a better tomorrow and make the individual choices every day to bring that future into existence.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. Yeah, the answer is sensationalism, and we love it. That's that's what we love, and I think it will forever, um, you know, bring us that entertainment that we love so much. But at the same time, once you realize it, then you're almost living your life as if you're in a movie yourself.
Right. No, right. And I think it can become cathartic like it's supposed to be. You can actually maybe revel in the metaphor of it all and learn
Exactly.
how it can actually better you. And I think when we take things too literally or get too wrapped up, we're losing track of the moral of the story, which is to be good to each other and to love our neighbors. And, you can't find a religion out there that doesn't tell you of these things. And
Hmm.
it blows me away that we are so divided when we all want the same things. We all want love. We all want family. We all want a little spot to call our own. We want to be well fed. We want nice things. And I think we're really approaching, in my view, we are approaching an era for the first time, maybe ever, where we could actually provide that for everyone equally. And I look forward to that era. I don't look forward to Armageddon. I look forward to the
Hmm.
Jetsons. I look forward to Star Trek. I look forward to geeking out over all these wonderful things that we really are only beginning to kind of scratch the surface of. But it's really great conversation. Morgan, do you have anything you wanted to add?
I mean, yeah, I know it's been rough. It's been really rough the past few years for a lot of people. So it's easy to fall into that thought of wanting it to be the end times. Like I hear people say all the time, I'm ready for the zombie apocalypse and stuff like that. And no, you're not. You're really not. You don't want that. It would be horrible. Um, and we shouldn't be manifesting things like that. It's it's not good. Um, we should be thinking about how we can better the world, how we can bring justice to people that need justice, how we can become more understanding and compassionate because it feels like right now, every day, we're getting further and further away from humanity. And that's scary. And I know people that can't picture a future right now. And that's also scary. So I think everyone needs to work on what they see in the future and don't base that on what the media is telling you. What do you want the future to look like? Hold on to those thoughts, and I think our lives will become a little bit better just by doing that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I will say to the people who maybe can't see a future, in a metaphorical sense, why not try picking up the paintbrush yourself and painting the future that you would like to see? And,
100%.
if everybody did that, it might lead to a much better future that we can all actually envision, rather than letting, the media and all these theories take the paintbrush from you. Um, perhaps you can write your own story in a sense, and that's something we can all definitely uh, do better at.
Well said, brother. Well said. Really great podcast. I want to thank both of you, Morgan LeFay, Bray Mysterio. Couldn't have done this without you. I'd like to thank all of the people who tuned in and joined us. Thank you guys. Please feel free to sound off with your thoughts in the comments. And we really hope you've enjoyed this meta popcast presentation of Revelation Apocalypse.
Yes, thank you all so much. It was very enlightening myself.
Yeah, thank you all for joining. We hope to do one of these again soon.